Today we have with us a wonderful guest who is the director of the Alexander Lowen Foundation. Alexander Lowen is the founder of Bioenergetics, which was one of the really initial body psychotherapy techniques that were developed in this country in the 1960s, and it's one of the core body therapies that are used and looked to by many body therapists that are have come since then. And his son Frederic Lowen has been helping to keep Alexander Lowen's MD's work really out there in the forefront by developing this foundation. And we would like to welcome Fred. Welcome to Be the Change.
Yes, thank you, Amy, and a good afternoon to you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Good. So, you in a sense are an expert of bioenergetics because of your intimate long relationship with your father. And that's such a unique position. I mean, many people learned bioenergetics over the years, but you have a different view of it because of your relationship with your father. So tell us about bioenergetics as you see what it was that your father was developing and what he contributed to the therapeutic field.
Sure, and it's true, I think, that having been raised by Alexander Lowen, who was true to his lifestyle and his philosophy, which was in alignment with how he believed the world should be for people, brought me up in a way that would be consistent with the so-called bioenergetic principles. And so unlike many people who seek this out, I kind of grew up amidst it, and my worldview, I think, tends to reflect that. And it's interesting because I share this, in fact, with other kids who are real second-generation bioenergetic, people who have parents who were bioenergetic therapists. They also feel as though they have a slightly different worldview from what would be considered to be normal or mainstream or that sort of thing. But in any case, be that as it may, bioenergetic analysis is what they had developed, and it's the examination of the human personality in terms of the energetics of the body. So it's key to a person's well-being that not only he be psychologically healthy, but that he be physically healthy. And physically healthy doesn't necessarily mean having the right cholesterol number, being able to do so many push-ups or sit-ups or run so much distance or what have you. It really, in the bioenergetic view, has to do with how, in a sense, what it comes down to is how well integrated your body and your mind are. And in order to achieve that integration, the body needs to be free of hang-ups that occur through the course of all of us being brought up. We all have experienced various forms of trauma that have affected us psychologically to a greater or lesser degree. And these experiences are not only stored in the unconscious psychologically of the mind, but they're also stored in the physical structure of the body in the form of tight musculature. And where that musculature has tightened up against the fear or to suppress the anger or whatever the situation might be, that disturbs the energy flow within the body. It may not affect somebody's ability to do a lot of push-ups or run 25 miles or whatever they choose to do, but it will reflect how they use their energy as a person. And it's reflected psychologically in the way they think and the beliefs they have, and it's reflected in the body in the way their body is structured.
And you said that as a child being raised by Alexander Lowen, that you recognize that you have a different worldview and that is consistent with bioenergetic principles, and that other people who you have met, who you know, who also had parents who were bioenergetic therapists were very much affected by that. A lot of times I hear stories about people who are very affected by their parents who were ministers or psychoanalysts or this or that. And it's always, it's often kind of ironic because they'll be telling a story about how they spent a lot of their childhood kind of reacting to their parents, whatever their parents' principles were in that way. It doesn't sound like that's what you're talking about, but I wanted to check and just see what you mean by how you were affected and what that different worldview is for you.
Yeah, that's a long story in itself, no doubt. Let me think if I can say in a few words. I did, of course, like many children do, have the reaction of rebellion against your parents, defiance. And one of the bioenergetic principles is not to impose restrictions, but to provide a high degree of freedom to children growing up. And self-regulation is, as it's known, is to allow a child to self-regulate themselves, in effect, as they grow. And that's how they learn, of course. They interact with the environment. They learn what's good, what's bad. If as a parent you're always there saying, oh, don't touch that, or don't do this, or do it this way, or do it that way, you really rob the child of their creative impulses, their curious impulses, many of the positive impulses that really make life, that make life interesting. And so, that's one way, that's a very important principle in bioenergetics, is freedom of the self and knowing oneself. So my parents, I would say they did a good job in, and by no means perfect. I certainly had my own issues over the years, but they did a good job in providing a basic level of security. Security was never an issue for me growing up. I never felt threatened or intimidated in the family setting, in the family situation. And also being knowledgeable about psychology and psychotherapy, I think Dad and Mom both made efforts to not unload on me. And one thing, for example, I remember they would do is they would never gang up on me. It was a conscious thing that they did, but they made a point. If one of them was angry with me, then the other one would kind of back off, even if they shared the feelings. And so there's always that support and security and a sense of love. I always felt as though my parents really wanted me to be there, even though at times they kind of, took off and did their own thing. The basics, it's pretty simple stuff. A lot of bioenergetics is pretty common sense. But unfortunately, I think, as we all know, the world doesn't necessarily operate on a common sense basis anymore. In my view, there's a lot of dysfunction in the world. And so the mainstream, frankly, is kind of chaotic, just speaking in terms of how people think the world works. There seems to be so many different opinions and ideas and ideologies and conflicts, and of course it's resulted in a rigidification of, or paralysis even. You see it politically and that sort of thing. And that's all reflective of a people, frankly, who have kind of lost their way. And I think that my dad's way, bioenergetic analysis and the work that he's done, points to the fact that what's happened is that we've become somewhat disassociated from the life of our bodies. And we've gotten stuck in our heads. We've overcharged our egos, and we've overcharged our intellect, and we've overcharged our ideas, and we live in a world in our heads. We don't know to what degree we are all, collectively and individually, in our heads together. And once the body is relegated to a lower place, as it were, compared to the pursuits of the intellectual, then all of a sudden it seems morality goes out the window, empathy goes out the window, and it becomes a battle of rationality, logic, lies, frankly. I think we've all experienced tremendous dishonesty out in the world today. And I would say that that's a symptom of the mind-body split. I think the mind-body split is an affliction that Dad has characterized better than anybody else that I know, and that, of course, comes from his single-minded work with the body. As long as you stay true to yourself and true to the feelings that you have as an individual, you maintain a connection. Without that connection, or the degree that connection is broken, then people become lost. So having been brought up in such a way that I do trust my own feelings, I do trust my own intuition, and at the same time I develop my intellect, I try to keep the two aligned, and I believe that enables me to see fairly clearly what's going on out in the world. And boy, I'll tell you, what I see I don't really like. And what I see is this mind-body split happening. So how is my view different from the mainstream view? Well, to give you an example, an obvious example, there's no question in my mind that the only way that we're going to clean up the climate and get ourselves onto a sustainable future is if we allow the price of energy to rise. That's clearly in contradiction to the mainstream. In fact, the mainstream feels as though really the solution to our problems is to drill for more oil or to somehow acquire more oil and gas and all these fuels here, toxic as they are, and drive the price down. It's exactly 100% opposite to what we really need to do. And to me, that's as clear as night and day. There's no argument. You know, as long as prices of fuel and energy are low, we're going to continue to overuse and abuse them. So that's an example, and that perhaps, you know, that's just one way that I tend to see things that is opposite or in direct contradiction to the mainstream. Otherwise, I would characterize many people as just plain being confused. You know, how many times have you heard people, get the government out of my Medicare, keep the government hands off of my Medicare? You know, if you listen to what people say about the current situation, it really feels like they're not aware. And even if they have strong feelings about their position, it's often based on an ideology that, in large degree, is not really connected to reality. And out of this, it's not surprising that we get the kind of dysfunction that we have.